start with a quick announcement first, and then we'll come back to this slide. There is a movie that's happening here at the State Theater tomorrow evening, The Invisible Extinction, The Race to Save Our Vanishing Microbes. So we've added this as an additional extra credit movie in the lineup, so you can come and sign in. Elsie Sophie is going to be here in the lobby, so if you show up for extra credit, please make sure that you sign in your name and your TA with Sophie, so that we can make sure that we get you credit for this extra movie. So tomorrow night, 6 o'clock here in this room. We'll tie into some of what we talked about earlier with the gut biome, and then there's a scientists panel afterward that will be quite fascinating, I think. So this is happening tomorrow evening. I sent out the other announcements for this week via Canvas, so you can check your Canvas for that, the things that I covered on Monday. So that's there for you. All right, so going back to this, I'd like you to rub your hands together as fast as you can. Warm them up a little bit. And when we, once you get a really good warm up going, and then you spread your hands apart just a little bit, you can kind of feel the energy still moving in between your hands. You can play with it, see how far you can feel that energy that's still moving. You know, if you're not feeling it, you can do it again. So today's class is all about energy that's being put into the Earth's systems. This piece of art was done by Roy Park. He's from Las Vegas, as a middle schooler. He wrote this about his artwork. He said, "When I first decided to draw my artwork, I thought of drawing a little polar bear on a block of melting ice, signifying how global warming is affecting our oceans. Then I learned how the thickness and extent of the Arctic ice has been declining rapidly over the last decades, and how glaciers are also retreating almost everywhere around the world, from the Alps, the Himalayas, the Andes, the Rockies, Alaska, and Africa. And then I realized that I should be drawing a bear that has already sunk, not one floating on melting ice. This gave me a clearer picture of how our glaciers and ocean animals are sinking away too fast, and it inspired me to draw this, that he calls Sinking Beauty. Sinking Beauty is an illustration of a polar bear sinking from the destruction of humans, displaying the cold, hard facts from our torture of ocean on its fur. In the end, I hope the viewer understands this ghastly change to our Earth from my piece, and stands with me against this outrage." From a middle schooler. Actually, he was a middle schooler about the same time all of you were middle schoolers. So I understand that what's going on in our world right now may be already affecting you deeply on some levels, and maybe for some of you, you don't know exactly what's going on with climate change. But that's our topic for today. And we're going to dive into this with this question of what blocks me from feeling? Allowing ourselves to feel requires vulnerability, right? So what blocks me from feeling? Why don't you take a moment to think about it and then talk to your neighbor about that? What blocks me from feeling? think? What blocks you from feeling? Microphones. Great. Thank you. All right. Go ahead.
Hello. I think it depends on feeling what. Like for this specific class, talking about like this stuff, like feeling from climate change, I don't think there's anything blocking me. Like I see a 70-degree day and then we get snow the next day. Some people are like, yay, it's spring. I'm like, this is kind of terrifying because we've never had days go like that and change temperature and climate that fast.
Yep.
And then with this specific picture, I think it's better than most because the other ones are like violent and people will often look away because it's too much for them. But I think this is like strong enough that people get the message without being like grossed out enough to like look away. So people can look at this, see the bears crying and it's needing help.
Yeah. I just think it's so beautiful. It's so poignant. Thank you for sharing that. Feeling. Other thoughts about, there's somebody over on this side. Is there a microphone over that way someplace?
Personally, I don't think anything blocks me from like feeling, but I do think things block me from like voicing how I feel.
Oh, interesting.
Like expectations, or if it's just not something that it's even worth talking about, in my opinion, to other people. So I feel like no matter what, I'm gonna feel emotions about a situation, but I might not always express it.
Thank you for saying that. There is a difference, right? Yep. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. So we'll dive into this a little bit more. I find that feeling takes energy for me. And if I'm tired already, or if I'm rushing, or if time is short, sometimes I do block those feelings because I don't have time to process what might happen next if I really live into those feelings. And so today's class might bring up some hard feelings for you, which is very natural. And we'll be talking, the oceans class I know brought up some hard feelings for some of you that have expressed that to me or to your TAs. So, for instance, one of you mentioned that the plastics and the albatross video was hard because of the feelings that brought up, right? It's hard to watch those birds in that situation. And yet our feelings shape how we behave. That's the purpose of having feelings. We have the choice to listen to our feelings and then make action, take action. So check out this short video Ben's going to bring up for us about why we have feelings.
What is an emotion? The short answer, emotions are physical signals that are delivered through the body to let us know that we need or want something. To break it down a little, emotions have three parts. The first is the physical feeling itself. Maybe you've heard the idea that emotions are energy in motion. Well, it's true. First, something happens in our environment, and then we interpret it. You might interpret it consciously, or even more often, there's at least aspects that are interpreting it subconsciously, without your awareness. And however you interpret the emotion is going to signal a physical reaction in the body. This physical response is how we know we're experiencing an emotion. If the body didn't feel an emotion, we wouldn't know the emotion is there. This is important in meditation because your body is your emotional signaling device. When you want to know how you feel, that's where to look. The second aspect of emotion is why we feel it, which is to motivate us. Emotions are an evolutionary aspect of the human self that tells us when we need to change something. And these changes can happen in one of two directions. Positive emotions motivate us to change things in a positive direction, to keep doing more of whatever makes us feel good. Negative emotions motivate us in a negative direction. They feel awful, so we naturally want to avoid them or limit the degree to which we feel them. So it signals if something is not working for us and if we need to change something, do something differently. And then the last aspect of emotion is how we interpret the emotion itself. And this is super important because how we understand and think about our emotions is going to dictate how we behave and listen to our emotions. So often we think of emotions as these mysterious, scary, unpredictable forces that come at us. But what if we did interpret them more as just signaling devices? That might not only make emotions feel less scary, but it might give you a more effective way to deal with them. Because when you look at your emotions as a signaling device, you might start to listen to what they're trying to tell you. It's like emotions are just the messenger. And don't shoot the messenger. It's not going to solve your problem. If anything, it's just going to have more and more messages keep coming at you. If you actually listen to the message that's being directed, you might actually be able to do something better for yourself. Well,
So just take that in and consider that as we go through some of this information through this class and through some of the others. The world is on fire from Amazon to California, from Australia to the Siberian Arctic. The hour is late and the moment of consequence so long delayed is upon us. Do we watch the world burn, or do we choose to do what's necessary for a different future? We have known about the possibility of climate change since the 1930s, actually, and we've been certain that it's been happening since the 1960s. So this is all of that idea that we talked about love and what happens when we love these places, when we love this land, when we love the place, things that we want to keep. So how is it that the world has gotten to be in this place where the scientific evidence for warming of the climate is undeniable? Since then, since the 1960s, when we knew that it was happening, very little has been done to counteract it. Absent heroic efforts, the world right now is locked in this dangerous pattern of climate change. That's according to the report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It was released in 2021 in August, and that blunt assessment, the idea that if we don't do something, we are locked in this pattern. That became after years of deliberation at the request of the world's most vulnerable nations, places that are really going to struggle when the climate changes. When we looked at that global map the other day, thinking about how the extreme places of the equator and then at the poles, the things, that's where the climate is going to really ramp up and make a difference for the people that live there. So we need to limit the warming of our planet to 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's believed to be the upper limit that would preserve the stability of the world's interconnected ecological and societal systems. It's all connected. So if we go above that 1.5 degrees Celsius, there's going to be very dramatic change that happens on this planet. Thinking about the ecosystems and the biodiversity, the human communities at the global and regional levels. So there's so much that's vulnerable, that's in this balance because of the temperature of our planet. So this report, 270 authors with 34,000 citations of the science that they're doing. Any further delay in global action, we will miss a brief and rapidly closing window to secure a livable future. A quote from Hans Otto Portner, who is one of those researchers. Human-induced climate change is already affecting many weather and climate extremes in every region across the globe. Scientists are also observing changes in the atmosphere, the oceans, the ice flows, the land, the rise of extreme drought, wildfires, floods, and food shortages. They're going to affect over 1 billion people. Many of these changes are unprecedented, and some of the shifts are just showing up now, and yet some are still yet to come. Some are already irreversible for millennia. As the ocean has warmed significantly, that's not something that we can just cool down over a short period of time. So this year, though, more than ever, people have connected the dots between climate change and this terrible damage done by extreme weather patterns. This has brought about new urgency, and with that urgency comes opportunity. People are finally growing receptive to the idea that we have to make some change. So some policymakers are open to bolder action. But what needs to happen is that it can't be just now. We have to be able to sustain it. It has to be able to go on and on, 20, 30, 40, 50, etc. years in the future. It's going to take a while. Even if we bring down that temperature, it's going to take a while for everything to stabilize again. So you may have heard about this Paris Climate Agreement, happened in April, on Earth Day of April 2016, a legally binding international treaty on climate change, adopted by 196 countries. The idea is to keep our level of global warming to that 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's compared to pre-industrial levels, that pre-1700s temperature. So this way, by doing this, 196 countries signing this, means that we're in it to help each other. So some countries more than others can make change, and some countries more than others can afford these changes. It's going to be an expensive process. It's taken a lot of time and a lot of expense to get where we are now. So in order to backtrack or take it back is going to be equally as expensive. So we need to be able to work together. So what does this look like? How do we know? So the overarching patterns of weather have changed like this. So this is from 1880 all the way up to about 2015 or so, 2014 it says. So the temperature anomaly, these were below the average, and then we had a few rises here and then a little below, and then where we are going now, above the usual, is really consistent. It's changed. Yes, the Earth's climate has changed over the course of history. The last ice age ended about 7,000 years ago. And so now we're in this modern climate era. What's happening is that the 50 to 60 miles of gases that are held in place by gravity, held to this planet, 50 to 60 miles of atmosphere that protect us. I kind of think of that as a lot, but really over the course of this class period, if I hopped in my car, I could drive all the way out of our atmosphere. At 60 miles an hour, I'd be out. It's not that far. The heat-trapping nature of the gases, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and water vapor, that was all displayed understood in the 19th century, and now is when it's coming to fruition. So all of these gases in the atmosphere are trapping in the heat, the solar radiation that used to bounce back out, but now it gets stuck, and so it comes back down to Earth. And so that's what's happening, is the energy, just like when we did this, the energy gets trapped. So why? Where's this energy coming from? The fossil fuel gases trapping heat in the atmosphere, the number one in the United States is cars and transportation sources. It's the #1 source of US climate pollution. After that comes power plants, how we create the energy to run the lights to, keep the room warm. Power plants run all of that stuff. And then methane that's seeping directly into the atmosphere from oil and gas wells, leaks from pipelines, compressor stations, and other infrastructure that transports gas from wells to power plants and homes. So there's all of this that's escaping into the atmosphere from the way that we are tapping into the fossil fuels underneath the earth, underneath the surface of the earth. So the #1 polluter is China, the #2 polluter is the United States, then India, then Russia, then Japan. So we're right up there in this. So checking out this data, this is carbon dioxide. It's a little hard to read, but the gist, carbon dioxide levels, that's what's up there in the atmosphere. So you can see how 400,000 years ago, there is a cycle of how the atmospheric carbon dioxide has gone up and down with natural cycles until we hit this point of 1950. Do you remember what else happened in 1950? That was the start of plastics in 1950. And also all kinds of other industrial processes that sends more into the atmosphere. And this is where we are now. For the first time in 400,000 years, we are above this level of what is really safe, right? The way that they measure these is they're taking ice cores. They drill way down into the earth and they take ice cores from Greenland to Antarctica, tropical mountain glaciers, and this is how it shows. Evidence can also be found in ocean sediments and coral reefs and tree rings and sedimentary rock. The ancient evidence reveals that the current warming is at least 10 times faster than before. So then the result of this is the change of our temperature. So watch this. Ben's going to play a graph for us here. So watch the temperature change. There's a little point up in the upper corner where you can watch the actual temperature compared to the years. So So the increase in the amount of orange to 2014. So that how that energy that's getting trapped is increasing the temperature, which connects to what we talked about the other day with the oceans and such. So our global economy runs on fossil fuels. What are we going to do about that? Our global economy runs on fossil fuels. So there are still some influential people who deny that human-caused climate change exists, that they deny that climate change is a serious issue. Some of those people are directly related to the fossil fuel industry. They don't want us to stop using them because that industry supports their livelihood. So it makes sense. We might as well deny that it's happening. There are also people who are climate inactivists. There are a couple of categories of these folks. There are people that are waiting to see the real reports. What's really going on? So there are those folks. They're just waiting until the last moment to figure out that plan of action, only when they know it must really happen. And then there are those that acknowledge that climate change is happening, but they don't want to make change for some reason. The strategies of the climate inactivists, maybe they want to delay the change or divide people into who believes what. They might want to deceive with disinformation. They might want to downplay. So strategies of businesses and corporations and countries that depend on the oil and gas for their financial stability or for their success make sense that they're afraid, right? Afraid of that change. What's going to happen? This is primary energy world consumption. So up here at the top, these are the coal. This is coal, which is a fossil fuel. This is the renewable energy line, this little tan one in here. You can see it does increase as we get closer to today. So the renewable energies like wind power, solar power, and then hydroelectricity, which is also relatively renewable. Nuclear energy, which there's a lot of debate about what is going to happen with nuclear energy. And then we have the natural gas and the oil. So the gray, the red, and the green are all fossil fuel based. So our administration, current political administration, has made some significant strides towards change, but we need to just continue, right? These things sometimes take so long to happen. So like they've set out the goal that by 2035, there will be zero carbon emissions from power. Their goal is to use primarily wind and solar and possibly nuclear, but that doesn't seem optimal. Power plants are going to look significantly different. They'll look like big batteries that are storing energy. Cars by 2035 will not have combustion engines, and they also won't all be Teslas and Priuses. They'll be made by GM and Ford. As a matter of fact, these big auto manufacturers are already on board to make some change. The goal is that we're going to be able to pull into a charging station and charge our vehicles in the time it takes to now fill up with gasoline. Another big difference, hopefully by 2035, is that we'll see more stable weather patterns. And then by 2050, they're saying that zero carbon emissions, absolutely. There's now a climate envoy, a person who's in charge that goes to all the other meetings, all those other political meetings, and talks about climate. John Kerry is our climate envoy. He serves on the White House Security Council. It shows that they are increasing the amount of care, of discussion, the idea that this plays into every single thing that we do.